business now for 25 years of trying to protect forests in Sonoma County, forest ecosystems and forest watersheds. And on the coast, it's going to be impacted by the changes in climate, as everywhere will be. And so uh, I'm concerned about how um, it's not kind of you didn't bring up the subject of how these impacts will address forests and drying out of the forests because of warmer weather, and then with the impact possibly of wildfire uh, uh, being part of the equation. And so I just wanted to, address this as a climate change that impacts forests, which will impact, many of the other things. And what we have learned here throughout Sonoma County and even in the state is that, logging over forests uh, does not help with the high severity fire problem. And so in a local plan, I don't know if that can be addressed at all, but we need our intact forests. We need our we need to address the high fire severity that you would get if you logged over and took out many mature trees. And if you looked at the science on this, you would find that it is very compelling that to leave intact forests is one of the best measures for low severity fires, not high severity fires. This is going to occur in the local coastal zones as well as any other place. So if you're not going to address this, maybe you could comment on how this could be addressed in the local coastal plan. And I appreciate your work.
I actually was going to comment that we will be holding an entirely separate subject topic focused workshop like this one that will go over forestry practices and wildfire risks in the coastal zone. So I did not intend to interrupt you. I just wanted to let you know that there will also be that opportunity. Gary, if you could just remind us of the date of that one really quickly.
I believe it's next Wednesday.
Okay. Well, thank you. You should have interrupted me sooner.
Oh, no, that's okay. And look, the date and all the information will be on the LCP update website. But yeah, that's such a big topic. It's got its own workshop.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Excellent. I was worried that it wasn't going to come up. I appreciate your work, and I'll be looking forward to the additional comments and work that's being done on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right, my next speaker, it appears to be Kelsey Cody.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, I see some nods. Hey, John. So I have two questions. The first, maybe Wendy might be better positioned to handle. It has to do with ocean acidification and what, if anything, this plan does with respect to ocean acidification. And the second question has to do with soil health, recognizing that soil, not only when it's healthy, not only has the capacity to absorb carbon and therefore mitigate climate change, but also healthy soil absorbs water and therefore can mitigate flooding. And so I'm curious about how soil health and ocean acidification are being built into this plan. Thanks.
I can address the ocean acidification issue. And I will say that this, similarly to the fires question, it's such a big topic. There's a completely separate initiative to work on ocean acidification in our region and on our coast. So that is receiving a lot of attention from the sanctuary. And similarly, it is a collaborative effort between researchers and communities and agencies together. I think it's big enough that it is receiving a lot of attention. And today I was just talking about our coastal resilience plan with respect to sediment. And with the soils, perhaps Cecily, given your upland focus, or Gary, you can address that one.
Do I get it because I pressed unmute first? Is that how that works? That's actually a good point and something that we'll do some further research into. In terms of landmass, most of the landmass in the coastal zone is grazing land or forest land. There's actually not a lot of land that is subject to any future development. But you raise a great point, and I think we'll be talking to John Mack about that, who runs our Natural Resources Department, and take a look into some policy options.
Thank you.
All right. We have Norma. Welcome. If you could please unmute yourself.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to make a couple of comments. Climate change impacts and is impacted by a number of the elements of the LCP. And, several of the slides early on gave examples of those interactions and the impacts of climate change on the elements and impacts of the elements on climate change. So, it's really important to have that broad perspective of those of the interactions going both directions in so many of the elements. And just to the point of the jobs housing balance and the coast, it is very important. And we're going to talk about housing next week. And however, I want to say that VMT and GHG emissions are really more a function. Well, they're not just a function of jobs housing balance. That's really not what's driving VMT and GHG out here on the coast. What really drives it out here is recreational travel, tourist travel, visitors to the coast. So, we really need to get into grasping how those travel modes and how that impacts the VMT and the GHG, and therefore climate change and vice versa.
Thank you. Yes, I do believe we've got some inland work going on with visitor serving uses related to VMT that we may pull into the local coastal plan as well. It's been really interesting. And as you all know, this is a relatively new topic, but those visitor serving uses are one of the hardest things to wrap your head around with VMT, but we are taking that on.
Thanks.
And I would add that perhaps it was a mistaken impression that we're presenting workforce housing as the magic bullet for VMT or for climate change. The point was more that climate change is a consideration when we're locating workforce housing.
Thank you, Jason.
Hi there. Thanks for allowing the opportunity to speak. I'm a professional forester. Just really briefly, I just wanted to mention that forests are more than just a wildfire potential. They have really huge impacts when it comes to climate change and how we do things. Generally, how the LCP is written currently, most of the forest management work is done under timber harvest plans, which is a completely separate process, a CEQA equivalent process that's under the Board of Forestry. And then there's a lot of work that needs to get done that is not commercial work. And so just really briefly, and I just want to thank Gary for the overview also of what's going on here, because it led me to looking back at the public safety element. And one thing I have a question about is that in CPS 5B, it says controlled burns will be allowed on agricultural land with a permit. And I just wonder whether or not rural residential counts as ag land. And I'm more certain that timber production zone would be called something like that, but there's just a considerable amount of land that would be within the coastal zone that could benefit from prescribed fire. And so I'm just wondering whether or not there's considerations into that in the plan. And yeah, I'll leave my other forestry related stuff for one of these other meetings.
Thank you. Yes, that is one of the things that we are very interested in going into more deeply, particularly with that forestry conversation, but also the vast majority, as Gary's already said, of our coastline is in fact in agricultural zoning. The residential zoning districts are relatively limited to small clusters and established communities, and most of the other even residences are on agricultural properties. But of course, everybody needs protection, and that became eminently clear in this last year. So we are taking a look at that.
Yeah, and just one thing to add, unlike inland, the rural residential parcels in the coastal zone are very small. So it's densely settled and fairly urbanized. Those places that have houses, as Cecily said, most of those have agricultural zoning already.
And I just want to remind anyone who'd like to speak to raise their hands. I do have a couple of people that have spoken that have their hands raised again. So I will be, Larry, it looks like you had another comment to make.
Actually, I don't have another comment. I was trying to unraise my hand, but I guess I must have triggered something different. Anyway, again, thank you for the presentations, and I'm still listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecily. This is Eric Fraser again. I appreciate the opportunity to have a couple additional questions. So Dr. Phil King recognizes that TOT is one of the best practices when applied to climate change. And I was wondering if there's any examples of other LCPs that are able to effectively use TOT revenue generation towards climate change projects. That's my first question. My second question is following up on what Norma said about those vehicle miles traveled and how that may implicate visitors to the coastal zone. And I was wondering how other LCPs dealt with then that question when it's framed around affordable lodging and the ability to have more affordable housing, especially STRs in that coastal zone. Thank you. That's my two questions.
Thank you. Well, the first is that the local coastal plan does not, it's not a document that regulates taxation. That is done completely separately outside of the local coastal plan and outside of our department. But I would be interested in seeing if any LCPs do address that. Gary, can you take the second?
There I am. And with regard to VMT, I mean, this is an interesting topic because it's a fairly new state law. And so everybody is still trying to wrap their heads around how to do the analysis correctly. So that's a work in progress right now. And hopefully we'll have a better idea on how we're going to do a nexus between that and hospitality uses. But right now, even inland, that's one of our more challenging analyses to do. So the local coastal plan is really just going to have a program saying that we will develop standards. The LCP will not establish the standards.
Welcome back, C.
Hi, yes, this is just a format of workshop question, and maybe it's me having technical difficulty, but you know, we can't all be together in the same room and we can't all see each other. And normally with these types of workshops, there's a question and answer and a chat room, and you can see the attendees, a list of attendees. And I'm noticing that none of those features have been turned on. And I'm hoping that for future LCP workshops, that would be something you would consider, because it kind of helps us all feel like we're in the same room together when we can't be. So just making that recommendation, and hopefully that's something that we can do for future LCP workshops. Thank you.
Yeah, we will look into our options on the technology side of that. Thank you. And also, I did want to add that there was a question earlier about how many attendees we had tonight for this topic workshop, and it was up to 37 attendees. In addition to our 4 to 5 panelists, Brian did have to step out. And I see only one hand raised, and we are about at time. That hand is Jason Wells again. Oh, and actually we did just get, oh, I saw somebody pop up and then I lost them again. Kate, was that you? Okay. Kate, if you could unmute yourself.
Thank you. A while back, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact reference in front of me. The county put out a study on sea level rise focused on Bodega Bay. And I'm wondering if that's part of a regular program, how that type of study is part of the kinds of programs you're envisioning. And also, what was the result? Was anything ever done based on that to develop programs?
Yes, many of our sea level rise adaptation policies were actually developed from that study. It was the 2016 sea level rise vulnerability study. That is similar to the type of work that we're also continuing to do with our sediment committee. And that committee also gives us an ear towards continuing those types of programs and when new opportunities for that type of research become available.
Thank you.
I'll add a little piece to that. And I think one thing that the committee is striving to do is to collect and compile and distill all of the studies that have been done and look at the state of the science and what is best. So, we're trying to pull together all that kind of information.
Thank you. And Jason, it looks like it is back to you if you had another comment to add.
Yeah, I just realized that I didn't mean rural residential before. I meant the RRD. Yeah, so
That makes
resources in rural
sense.
development. Yeah. I know you said that, and I was like, "There's no way." It's like more than half the county. So that's that was my mistake. I just wanted to clarify that that's what I was talking about, and it looks like that is agriculture.
Yeah.
So okay.
And you can see why we found it kind of alarming to do prescribed burns in rural residential.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify that.
Thank you all very much for joining us. It does look like we are just about out of time and also out of comments, but of course, please continue to email your comments to us. And the email address is on our website as well as on each of our email blasts that go out. Next week, we will be addressing our housing workshop as well as the wildfire workshop on Wednesday. And Gary, could you remind me what's lined up for Friday?
Open space and ASHA.
Of course you would know that one, John. Great. So again, one of the things about these topic workshops is it really has allowed us to get some great, policy insight from all of you, as well as, the the consideration of how intertwined many of these issues are. So though it wasn't the original intention with the schedule, I'm actually personally really happy that we were able to start today with climate adaptation. I think that's going to set a good tone as we go into a few of those that are going to remain relatively focused on that topic. And an extra thank you, of course, to Wendy for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you, Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks
It
for
added so much.
I always enjoy working with all of you.
Okay. Thank you all. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. And I don't need to tell everyone to drive home safe like I normally would at the close of one of these evening workshops. But if you aren't home, please do so. Have a good night.
Take care, everybody.